Tips for writing your essays in this class. For starters, use the eTutoring Writing Lab service. You can find this on the left-hand menu that is on our homepage. You'll see home, modules, discussions, grades, etc. Use the eTutoring button there. You will need to make an account if you don't already have one. It's very simple, and you use your OC credentials. Then, when you use the Writing Lab, you will essentially submit your paper and receive it back 1 to 2 days later with comments on it. This is a pretty easy and rewarding experience. We often think of tutoring as something that is reserved for remedial students, for students who need extra help, but in truth, it is my A college students who use every resource available to them. So to encourage you, you do have extra credit to earn, 5 points on this paper for using the Writing Lab. When you submit your paper, you can also submit evidence. So you can attach the document that you receive back with the tutor's feedback in it. You can attach screenshots. You can, make sure to write me a comment when you submit that says, I use the eTutor, and that just reminds me to look for that evidence, okay? I want to make sure you earn those 5 points if you use the Writing Lab. All right, use all the resources on the Writing Lit Papers page. I am thinking of that page like a class period in which I go over these resources. I expect you to use them. So when I'm grading, I'm going to grade with that in mind. So if I'm grading and your in-text citing is not what it should be, I'm going to think to myself, well, this student didn't use that Writing Lit Papers page and all those examples and links that I provided there, okay? If your structure is lacking a thesis statement or a conclusion, again, I'm going to think, oh, wow, this student had all of those resources and they didn't use them, right? So think of it like assigned reading or an assigned class period in which we go over these things. I expect you to use that page. All right, read at least one example on that page. And look for structural elements such as an introduction, a thesis statement, topic sentences, text evidence, a conclusion, all of that stuff. You might even print it and just annotate it so that you can identify these things. And that helps a bunch when you are writing a paper. Details to get right in a lit paper: titles of books, plays, or works published singularly, not anthologized, should be italicized. So for example, Kindred. So if you're going to work with our novel in your paper, you will need to italicize the title. Titles of shorter works, such as poems, short stories, those should be put in quotation marks. So an example here is Bullet in the Brain. You're going to write about literature in the present tense. This is important. It can be a little tricky when you write about context as well, or when you write about the author's life. So you're going to write about historical movements, the author's life, all of that in past tense. But when you're when you're writing about an actual piece of literature using the text, it will always be present tense. And just, you can remember that by remembering that literature is timeless. It deals with timeless themes and issues and questions relating to the human condition. And, guess what? It turns out the human condition doesn't change a whole lot, right? We suffer, we love, we die. That's pretty much it. So we can think about that in the present tense, right? Okay, review MLA guidelines for formatting, in-text citing, works cited page. MLA has been updated multiple times in the last decade. For instance, some of you are putting commas on the discussion board between the author's last name and the page number. I was taught that too forever ago, but that's incorrect now, so we want to leave that out. There are other little things that may have changed from the last time that you used MLA or you were taught MLA, so you just want to review it. There are, again, resources on that Writing Lit Papers page to help you with that. Focus on your thesis. The thesis is the most important sentence in your essay. Make sure that it is a claim, an arguable statement, not a factual statement. So we have some examples here that you can pause and read. I'll read one of them. The story of the hour explores the topic of marriage. That is factual. No one will be able to argue with you on that. However, if you get more specific, you can create something that is debatable. The story of the hour poses a troubling question. Does marriage inevitably encourage people to impose their private will upon a fellow creature? Okay. All right, so you really want to pay attention to your thesis statement. Again, more resources on that Writing Lit Papers page. Remember your structure. Introduction. You need to include all the necessary details about the work. So we need the title, the author, the date. You could even include a short summary, 1-2 sentences. And you also must have your thesis. It should come at the end of the intro. I do not know who has been teaching students to put the thesis at the very beginning, but that person needs a stern talking to, right? Whatever, I have this imaginary teacher, high school teacher in my mind who is telling students to put a thesis at the very beginning. And I just want to buy him or her a cup of coffee, sit them down and say, no, right? It needs to go at the end of your introduction. So everything up to that is just preparing your reader, whatever your reader needs to know to fully appreciate your argument, all of that context info, right? You want to provide that, and then you just hit them with your thesis there. Body. Each paragraph is about one specific claim or reason in defense of your thesis. Use topic sentences, folks. We do not want to start or end our paragraphs with quotations, citations, right? You really need to have this main idea of your paragraph at the beginning, and then you're going to prove it throughout with evidence. And the reason I say don't end with a citation is that it's really a great rule of thumb because it makes it so that you have to evaluate every quote. You don't want to just drop a quote in there. We want to avoid that. You want to make sure that you are explaining all of your quotes, all of your citations fully. So good rule of thumb, never begin, never end a body paragraph with a citation. Conclusion. Don't merely repeat what you've said. In addition to that, consider explaining implications or areas of ambiguity or unresolved questions, right? In a really solid conclusion, you're offering your reader some extra food for thought. So what do I mean by implications? Well, what picture of your author's work or worldview does your argument imply, right? Alternatively, what might your argument suggest about some real-world issue or situation? Implications don't have to be earth-shattering, but it helps your reader continue the conversation after putting down your essay. And in terms of areas of ambiguity or unresolved questions, consider, are there any remaining puzzles or questions that your argument or the text itself doesn't resolve or answer? Or, maybe your argument suggests a new question or a puzzle worth investigating. So again, this is something that convinces your reader to continue the conversation. Now, speaking of continuing the conversation, I'm going to move on to showing you a few of those resources on the Writing Lit Papers page.